Welcome to Sunday morning. We are so glad that you're here. We have a few announcements before we get started with our worship. Church, we're having in-person services. I am so excited. If you can't come to in-person services, the camera will still be on, and we will be filming our services just like we're doing right now. So you can still tune in on Sunday mornings and watch our online service. And again, you're part of our church, and we love you. Next announcement. If you would like to give to the church, there's 3 ways that you can do it. The first way is you can go on nvlife.org, that's right here, and you can press the give button, and you could give there. That's the easiest way to do it. The other way is that you can mail it into us, and our address, again, is at that website. And another way is you can drop it off on the Sunday mornings that we meet. We are so glad that you're here. We love you guys so much, and I know it's going to be an incredible time of worship.
Good morning, Napa Valley Life Church. Thank you guys for joining us again. You know, with everything going on in the world right now, it's safe to say that we're all probably feeling fear in one way or another. And you know, the way that I'm feeling it may be completely different than the way that you're feeling it or the way that somebody else is, but it's still there. And so this scripture has really been speaking to me lately, and it's in 1 John. It says, "There is no fear in love. Instead, perfect love drives out fear." So when we stand in God's love, fear can't get in. It becomes weak, and it no longer possesses the power to rule over our lives, because we have the joy and the hope of God. And for me, that's just so wonderful and so comforting to know, and I hope it is for you too. And so this song speaks on standing in God's love, and it's really spoken to me recently. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear, it doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Yes. And shame no longer has a place to hide. And I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. I won't be shaken. No, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear, it doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. I'm standing in your love. This power that can break off every chain. Oh, this power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrecting power that can save. There's power in your name. Power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear, it doesn't stand a chance when I stand in
rolling hills were dotted with livestock, and the sound of sheep could be heard in the distance. It was a peaceful contrast to the anger and arguments that had surrounded Jesus in recent days. He'd made a blind man see, and while there were some among the crowd who responded in faith, there were also religious leaders who were too upset by his message to even care about the healed man. But Jesus cared. He cared about the man who had been blind, and he cared about the world he came to save. He lovingly looked over the crowd, and as a shepherd calls to his sheep, he said, "Please hear me and understand this. I am the door of the sheep." Most people in the crowd listening to Jesus understood that sheep are helpless creatures. Without the wisdom and guidance of a loving shepherd, they would easily lose their way and wander into danger. Jesus knew the people listening to him were like sheep without a shepherd, harassed and helpless. They, like lost sheep, did not understand how close they stood to danger and how easily they could be lost forever. But for the sheep, there is a safe place. There is protection in the sheepfold. It is where the shepherd brings his lambs in, away from the hidden dangers of the night. The gate of the sheepfold held these precious lambs secure, and the shepherd guarded them with his very life. That is why Jesus said, "I am the door of the sheep. If anyone enters through me, he will be safe and completely restored." In Jesus, there is safety for all God's children. The sheep must always be careful, because there are false shepherds who scheme of ways to sneak into the sheepfold. But the secured gate is the only right way in and out of the sheepfold. It is where the true shepherd calls his sheep out for the day, and where he guides them back in for the night. Only a thief and robber would try to drag an unsuspecting sheep out any other way. But the sheep never need fear the good shepherd. He knows each one of his sheep and calls them by name. They know his voice and trust his leading, and they refuse to follow anyone else. He leads them to green pastures and beside still waters. He restores them when they stumble and fall, and he comforts them when they are afraid. The good shepherd loves his sheep. The words that Jesus spoke were life to those willing to hear him, but he had a stern warning for the religious leaders in his audience. He called them thieves and robbers. They did not truly care for God's children. They did not feed the hungry, care for the sick, or give direction to the lost. These religious leaders were selfish and did not love the people with the heart of a true shepherd. They were cruel and unkind. Like a thief, they did not enter through the true gate of Jesus, but made their own entry in their own way. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." His message could not be silenced by the thieves and robbers who hated him, and his life could not be taken by those unfamiliar with his voice. He gave his life willingly to save the sheep he loved, and he rose again, victorious, to offer everlasting life. All those who enter at the gate, the true gate that leads to life, Jesus Christ, will live forever under the care of the great shepherd.
Welcome, everybody, to another Sunday morning. We are so glad that you're here. We're going to have church this morning. And a matter of fact, we're having church in multiple locations. So we ask you guys to pray for the people in service, and we're going to pray for you online. And the goal is at some point we're all back together again in person. And we know that some of you aren't comfortable with that or can't do that yet. We love you guys. We're still all the church together. But as we continue, we're going to keep going in our He Is sermon series, this idea of the 7 I am statements in John. And today, Jesus is going to say that he is the gate to life. Gates. Gates offer this idea of security. And as we look at gates, one of the most common ones, or the most famous ones at least, is this gate right here. It's called Fort Knox. Fort Knox is a base, a military base, that's the most secure building in the world. Why? Well, because the U.S. keeps about 5,000 tons of gold in Fort Knox. And so we keep it secure. We don't want our gold to be taken away. And some of those security measures are things like this. It has a 22-ton door in front of it. And even if you could get to the door, before the door, there is, and that you can't get through that 22-ton door, by the way. Before the door, there are Apache helicopters that surround it. There are tanks. There are fences. There are guards. There are concrete-lined granite walls and alarms surrounding the facilities. You're not even going to get to the door here, is what I'm saying. This is the most secure location in the world. And we can make commentary on why it's so secure. But as we look at this, we see a place that people find security in a building. But there is nobody that would be in the middle of Fort Knox, locked down behind the 22-ton door, saying, man, I am secure, but I'm also free. That security of Fort Knox does not represent freedom. Why? Because if you were locked in Fort Knox, you wouldn't be free. You'd be stuck in a building that no one could get to you. See, as we look at the gate today, we need to understand that Jesus is not Fort Knox. Instead, he comes from a different place. He has this different idea of being a gate that is not only security, but also freedom. And he sums it up here in chapter 10, verse 10, when he says this, a thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, but I have come so they may have life and have it abundantly. Have it in abundance. So we're talking about today that Jesus is the gate, and that gate provides security, but it also provides freedom in that we can live an abundant life through Jesus. This is where we're at, John 10. Now, we have been coming up to this with these I am statements throughout the weeks, and that's how John writes his book. He writes this in kind of the series of sevens, 7 signs and miracles, which we looked at. Now these 7 I am statements. And why does John do that? Well, he's not taking a chronological account of Jesus' life. Instead, he's writing to you with purpose, and that purpose is defined in John 20:31. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. The purpose of John's writing is to tell you that Jesus is God and that you can find salvation through Christ. The whole purpose of the book. That's why when we tell new Christians to read a book, we tell them to read John so they can understand that. And so when he's saying these I am statements, he's leading to that purpose. I am the gate, simply meaning this. I am the access to salvation, which is what Jesus is going to say in this text. But before we get there, there are 7 verses before our text, which is verses 7 through 10 today, that we need to get through so that we can understand what's going on. So let's look at verse 1 in chapter 10 of John. Truly I tell you, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in another way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. Jesus starts this statement by saying, look, there's one shepherd and everybody else is the enemy. Everybody else is evil. There's only one way to access salvation, and that is through Jesus Christ. And so as we look at this, he's building up to a point. He's talking to the Pharisees. And over the last few chapters, Jesus healed a blind man that was blind from birth, which is significant in itself. The blind man goes to the priest and says, look, I'm healed. Isn't this incredible? And the priest go, prove it. Get your parents over here so we know that you're the right person. They continually tell him to prove it, and so he does, and they still don't believe him. They don't believe that Jesus did this. They call Jesus evil, and the man's like, how could he be evil? He gave me sight. And finally, they get to this point where the man believes. He says, I believe. Because Jesus looks at him and says, anybody that doesn't believe is blind, and anybody that does has salvation. And so the Pharisees come up, listening to this conversation, and go, are we blind too? And Jesus starts here, and he says this, look, I am the shepherd, and there's only one shepherd. There's only one access to heaven. Everything else that came before it is evil. because there's only one way to do this. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the next 2 weeks. Let's continue on with verse 3. The gatekeeper opens it up for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. We've known this from the last few weeks now, that Jesus continually talks about God pulling the sheep or pulling people to him, drawing them into salvation. Meaning this, that God has more agency in our salvation than we do. That God draws us in, calls us by name, and we respond. We hear his voice. This is significant. As he's talking to the Israelites, as he's talking to the Jews, he's saying, look, God is calling his people out of this idea that they're the only children of God and into this new pen that is the church, the kingdom of God on earth. He's saying that you need to be called through, and the only gate is Jesus. And they're not responding. They don't get it, but Jesus calls us by name. Look at that intimate picture of ownership. Anytime we see anything named or called by name, it's an intimate picture of ownership. And that's what the shepherds had in relationship to their sheep. Now, us in the Western context, we don't understand shepherds as much because there's not really shepherds around. When we hear the word shepherd, we think of sheepdog. That's kind of who we think of. Now, if you're in Jerusalem, that's a whole different picture. Shepherds were everywhere. And shepherds had this intimate relationship with their sheep where they would actually name the sheep. And the cool thing about this is that sheep were smart enough to recognize when their owner or their shepherd called, but they couldn't do the same thing if it was somebody else. So let's say you and I both owned a sheep. You owned a sheep and his name was Chris, and you called Chris and that sheep came to you. If I was standing next to you and called Chris, the same sheep, the same name, the sheep would not recognize my voice and would walk the other way. It wouldn't recognize. So God's drawing us in. This is significant. This is intimate. That your God, your Creator, calls you by name and then leads you. Church, this is wonderful. Let's continue on in verse 4. When he has brought all his own outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger. Instead, they will run away from him because they don't know the voice of a stranger. You're drawn to the only voice that is Jesus. And if you know Jesus, that's the only voice that you'll recognize and you'll follow. And the interesting thing here is that when we look at leadership with a shepherd, it's not this idea that the shepherd pushes out the sheep and then just kind of watches. No, the shepherd walks in front of the sheep and the sheep follow behind. Why? So the shepherd can encounter the dangers before the sheep does. That's your God. That's Jesus Christ saying, you will follow me and I'll encounter the danger before you need to. That's a beautiful picture of what Jesus does for us. But here's the thing. And look, false shepherds, they can never, there is no false shepherd. They cannot lead the sheep. They will not lead the sheep. They can only steal in the situation. And here's the sad part about it. In verse 6, Jesus talking to these men, to these Pharisees that would have understood shepherds. If they took a stone in Jerusalem and threw it in any direction, chances are they're going to hit a shepherd. They should understand what Jesus is talking about. But in verse 6, we see this, that Jesus gave them the figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. They couldn't get a very basic picture of the shepherd and the sheep and the leading and the drawing. Why? Because they refused to admit that they were sheep. They refused to admit that they were sheep. They had a higher idea of who they were. They couldn't be sheep. They were religious leaders. They couldn't be sheep. They were the ones molding what the Israelites should look like. They could not admit that they were sheep, even though they should have easily understood this illustration. Church, as we are looking at the next two I am statements, we need to start with the idea that we are sheep. You, sitting in your chair right now, you're a sheep. I, standing right here, reading God's word, I am a sheep. We need to understand that and take freedom in that. And some of you who have been church for a long time are saying right now, yes, I get it. We hear it all the time. We see it on the posters. I am a sheep and he is the shepherd. We get it. But in the same way that you say you get it, you try to assert control into your life. You try to say that I am in control, that this is my life, that this is my faith, that this is my call on what I get to do. You assert that control, but sheep cannot assert that control. They do not have the ability of that. Instead, they follow the shepherd. They are protected by the shepherd. They are saved by the shepherd. Church, if we're going to admit that we're lowly sheep, we have to find comfort in the fact that we are lowly sheep, because that is where we will find life. That's where we won't be like the religious leaders, when we submit and admit that we are humble. Not be humble. We are already humble creatures in front of a universally big God. And so we look up to that God and say, we are the created, not the creator. We are the saved, not the savior. We are sheep. And so today, as we look at us being sheep, if you don't understand this, the rest of the sermon's not going to make sense, and neither will next week's. Because as we look today, we're looking at Jesus as the gate to life. Jesus as the gate to life. So what does that sheep gate have to offer? What does the gate have to offer? Well, let's look at that. First thing that the gate, Jesus as the gate offers, is that he offers security. Verse 7, Jesus said again, truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. Truly I tell you, Jesus starts this, so we know this is a cornerstone statement. And then he says, I am the gate for the sheep. Anybody else are thieves and robbers. Now this week's the gate, next week's the shepherd. And yes, he's using the same illustration for both here, but we can get it. We can understand this because we understand what gates are. Most of you have them in your house. Some of you have built them. I built a terrible gate one time, and it didn't offer any protection. Because what's the cornerstone? What's the fundamental reason we have a gate? Well, we have a gate for security, whether to keep stuff in or to keep stuff out. It's the reason we build a gate. And as we look at this idea of a sheep pen, we don't, again, understand that as much here. The sheep pen most likely would have been a rough stone or kind of a brick mud structure. It's most of the time only partially roofed, and it either sits in a hill or even it could be in a cave. And it only had one opening to which the sheep could get in and out of. And it was served to protect them from thieves, robbers, wild beasts. And that's what Jesus is saying here. I am the gate, and I'm here to protect you from those who are thieves, robbers, that the sheep didn't listen to them. They should not listen to them. And he's absolutely referring to the time before he came where people were coming up saying that they're the salvation, they're the messiahs, and they were false messiahs. And church, we would be mistaken if we didn't recognize that that's happening today. People are coming up today saying that we are the saviors. We are the way to salvation. We are the way to enlightenment. We are the way to nirvana. And Jesus is saying, no, there's only one gate, and I'm it. And he provides us the security. See, during the day, the sheep could not stay in the pen. They'd have to eat, right? And so the shepherd would let them out of the pen through the gate, and they would go out to the field to graze. And at the end of the night, the shepherd would call them in, like we talked about, draw them in by name, and he would inspect each sheep as he was going through the gate. And as the shepherd was inspecting the sheep, he'd see for wounds, and he would heal or bandage those wounds. He would look for anything that was hurt on the sheep. He maybe would wash them off, and then he'd let them into the gate, and he'd shut the gate. And not only would he shut the gate, he would then lay in front of the gate so that nothing could get to the sheep. Church, is this not the picture of salvation and of security? God leading us, bringing us back to safety, calling us back into his security, checking us for wounds, then laying down to keep us safe. This is security. And absolutely, as we look in this world, we have thieves, robbers, and beasts that come to attack us. This world is dangerous, but God absolutely protects us. See, our church, our God is not here to trick us. He's here to keep us secure. And he's saying you're going to get only protection through the gate. And that's Jesus Christ. So let's apply this to life. If you are a Christian, if you call yourself a follower of God, don't look for security elsewhere. There's nowhere else you can get security. This is the most important application of the day. Politics won't save you. Money won't save you. Relationships won't save you. Governments won't save you. None of that will save you. There is only one thing that can provide eternal security, and that is Jesus Christ. When I was about 13 years old, I went on a camping trip with my youth group, and we took a bus up there because there was about 30, 40 of us, and it was this little campsite. And so we put up our tents, and we were staying out there. And in the middle of the night, the park ranger showed up kind of blaring a noise, a sound. And he woke all of us up, and he came out and said, guys, we have seen bears. Have been bears recognized within a mile of this camp, and they'll probably come for the food that we left out because we didn't know what we were doing. And so he said we needed to find safety. And some of us said, well, can't we just stay in our tents? And he said, that's not safe. And so all of us had to go into the bus and sleep in the bus. Why? Because we recognized that safety was in the bus and that the tent couldn't save us. And so as this world is crumbling around us, where are you finding your security? Are you looking for the government to give you security, for a political party, or even the gun that's in your shed? Do you feel like that's going to give you security? Because it might protect you a little bit here and there, but as far as eternity goes, none of that is going to provide security. If you call yourself a Christian, you are saved by Jesus. That's being in the bus. But you're also kept secure through him. Trust him, laying on the gate, even in death. Philippians 1:21, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain. Look, even in death, we are secure. Isn't that wonderful, especially as we look around and everything is unfortunately upside down? That Jesus is still your security no matter who you are. Jesus is your security. For the non-Christian, are you secure? The Jews were not down with these statements. Why? Well, because they're not secure and they wanted physical security, but Jesus was bringing them permanent security. They wanted Jesus to be a great military person that could come in and release them from Roman control and give them the physical security and the security right now and the security of wealth and all of that kind of stuff that comes with it. And Jesus said, look, I'm not here for any of that. You don't understand why I'm here. And there might be some of you who are saying, I want security that is physical. The security that says I can go to bed in a nice big house tonight, or I could go to bed in any house tonight and it will be fine and I'll be safe and secure. And look, that's not what Jesus was saying here. He's saying here, look, I'm going to give you permanent security. And that means that it does not look the same as what we identify as security. And maybe that's what you need in your life. I can guarantee you, if you don't know Jesus, that's what you need in your life, and you can only find it in him. First thing that the gate provides is security. The second thing the gate provides is freedom. The gate offers freedom. Verse 9, I am the gate. If anyone enters me, will be saved and will come in and out, will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. There is no place in the world that can offer security and freedom. It's more of like a galactic scale, a scale of maybe I'll have a little more security if I can give up a little bit of freedom. Or maybe I'll have a little bit of freedom if I can give up some security. And only in Jesus can he look at you and say, look, I can give you both. I can give you security and I can give you freedom. I am the gate, is what he says. You will be saved and you will have freedom. You're no longer stuck in your pen in fear. This is like the Israelites were like. They said, hey, they were stuck in their pen in fear, but instead they have the freedom to what? To be saved and to come in and go out and find pasture. They can go out and find pasture because Jesus offers them freedom. The security offers them freedom. You have freedom because Jesus is the gate. And trust me, the enemy is absolutely real. Those warnings that Jesus gives that the enemy wants to steal, kill, and destroy are absolutely real. But he's also saying, look, the steal, kill, and destroy mean nothing when I'm your security and I am your freedom. That's what Jesus is promising you. But through Christ, we can come in and go out and find pasture. We are free. Yeah, there's dangers around us, but we're free. So what is freedom? What is pasture? Well, let's define this a little bit more. Romans 6:6, for we all know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body ruled by sin might be rendered powerless so that we may no longer be enslaved to sin, since a person who has died is freed from sin. What is freedom? Well, it's easy enough. Freedom is the absence of bondage, the absence of slavery. The bondage in our life that we were all born into is sin. The slavery that all of us have is sin. And when Jesus becomes our gate, our security, he is the gate. When we walk through that gate, when we have the security, he removes the bondage of sin on our life. And it's never there again. We're free from death because the punishment was taken by Jesus. We're free from sin because, again, that was put on Jesus. And we are free. And the pasture is our life, even life in a broken world, even life when we look at the world and say, can it get worse? This is a crumbling year, 2020. It just keeps getting worse. Whether it's murder hornets or a virus we don't know what to do with, or racial pain that has been there for centuries. Church, it's a broken world, but Jesus offers us freedom in this broken world. And he gives us a chance to taste the world as it's intended to be so that we can see the world not tainted by our sinful nature. Recently, I was working on our house. Now, you guys know this. I like water, and I like really healthy water. I like good tasting water. And so I put a reverse osmosis system in my house recently. That's just a water filter, a fancy water filter device. And so as I was I'd never done this before. I'd never really done a lot of plumbing before. There's this thing called plumber's tape that you're supposed to put on the thread of the pipe, and it's supposed to keep it secure. Well, I forgot to put it on one of the pipes. Everywhere else I did it. And I was like, oh, I don't want to take this thing apart again. It was already put back in, but I knew it was going to leak. And so I wrapped it in plumber's tape, hoping that it would keep it secure. And I turned it on. And for about 30 seconds, I was really relieved because it didn't leak. But then it started happening. Drip, drip, drip. And I said, okay, well, the only way to fix this is more plumber's tape. And by the time that the plumber's tape was a good 2 inches around that pipe, I realized that this thing was not going to stop dripping. And I had to take it apart and put it back together the way it was intended to be. And look, I did, and now it works. No drip, no anything else. It works. Why? Because it was the way it was intended. Church, the world is broken. This is not how God intended the world to be. But through our sin and our brokenness and our decision to follow ourselves other than Christ, other than God, the world broke. But now we can live and see the world as it's intended to be. And that's through Jesus' freedom. John 8, just a couple chapters before, still in this story timeline, verse 33, it says this, we are descendants of Abraham, they answered. This is a religious leader saying, look, we don't need Jesus. We're descendants of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone. How can you say we will become free? Look, we're already children of God is what they're saying to God, saying to Christ. Look, how can we've never been enslaved because we're children of God. And in verse 34, Jesus responds, truly I tell you, cornerstone statement, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. It's the bondage of sin. A slave does not remain in the household forever, but a son does remain forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free. Jesus offers freedom. We are free. The pasture is waiting. And we can walk through that pasture because Jesus provides security through the gate and leads us. He doesn't want us to be free to sit in a pen all day. No. Instead, he sets us free, then sends us out into the world and said, look, you're safe. You're secure. But you're also free. So Christian, what are you doing with your freedom? People who say, I am a follower of Jesus, what are you doing with your freedom? How is your life in freedom different than your life of when you were a slave to sin? Listen to that again. Because if there's no difference between before you were saved and after you were saved, there are major problems here. Because now you are free, free indeed, you need to live like you are free. And so if there is no difference with a before and after, there's an issue. because we are called to live in freedom. Galatians 5:1 says this, "For freedom Christ set us free. Stand firm then and don't submit again to the yoke of slavery." The gate doesn't keep the people of God in the pen. Instead, Jesus opens the gate and sends people into the world. He protects us, but know also that doesn't mean that danger won't come into our way, that it won't attack us. Look, it might even kill us, but through the security of Christ, death doesn't matter anymore. The sting of death does not matter anymore. So we're free. And we're surrounded by brokenness all around us. So what are we supposed to do? Well, Galatians 5:13 says this, "For you're called to be free, brothers and sisters. Only don't use this freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but serve one another in love. For the whole law is fulfilled in one statement, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out, or you'll be consumed by one another." Look, you're free. So live like it. Live free. Serve each other. Love each other. Love the people around you. Spread the hope of Jesus around you. If there is ever a time for this message, it is now. Look around you. The world is in need of your service as followers of Jesus, desperate for love, desperate for freedom, desperate for security, and we know the truth. You want to serve your people? You want to see the people on the news get healed? Then start spreading the love of Jesus Christ. Start serving them. Start sacrificially serving them. You're free. You're secure. Don't act like you're in the bondage of sin any longer. If you don't know Jesus, the cost of slavery is too much. The cost of being enslaved in sin is too much. Jesus responded, "Truly I tell you, everyone who commits sin is a slave to sin. A slave does not remain in the household forever, but a son does remain forever. So if a son sets you free, you'll be free indeed." It's time. Let the Son set you free. He's drawing you by name. Let him draw you in and be free. Meaning this, that you recognize that you are in bondage of sin, because we all are. That's how we're born. That's a cause from Adam and Eve deciding that they didn't want God's way, but they wanted their own. And now the sin has caused death on your life. It's the punishment for sin. But Jesus Christ took that death on a cross. And now he defeated death through the resurrection. And now you have the opportunity to be freed from the bondage of sin, the slavery of sin. Call out to him. Tell him, "I am ready to be free," and live for him. This is the gospel. This is the way to freedom. And as we look in the world of chaos, there's many of us that want this. We want Fort Knox. We want to be behind a 22-ton door. We want the Apache helicopter surrounding us. We think that this is what it's going to take for us to be secure. But this may be secure, but this is not permanent, and it's also not freedom. This is not freedom. Instead, we have a good God, a Savior that says, "Look, I will make you secure. I will make you secure. I will give you assurance that you will be with me even in death, that death does not have sting on you any longer, but I will also give you freedom. Freedom to go out into this broken world and say, I will be hope. I will be the presence of Jesus to a broken world, that we can introduce them to the gate." Let's end with where we started in verse 10. "A thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come so that you may have life and have it in abundance." We're not called to stay in Fort Knox. Instead, we're called to live in freedom. Life abundantly knows that the world is bearing down, that the world is getting darker by the second, and there's nothing but it has nothing that it could do against us, that it cannot harm us, because even in death, we are with Christ. Church, recognize that. Do not fear death any longer. It does not have a sting, because even in death, as Paul says, death is gain. But instead, we go out into the brokenness. Yes, the brokenness that we see on TV, the hurt and the pain, that is absolutely real, church. Do not disregard another person's pain. And we can go out there and say, "Look, We know that they're suffering. We know the world doesn't get it. We know that they're still hurt. But we also know that there is salvation in the gate. There is hope in the gate. There is freedom in the gate. And there is security in the gate of Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Lord, you are so good. And we thank you for being the gate. We thank you that it does not take Fort Knox to keep us secure, but instead we can be secure and we can be free, Lord. Do not let us waste it, Lord. Do not let us waste our freedom on ourselves. But instead, Lord, we are committing to you to go out into this world and to be a voice of hope, to show people you as gate, Lord, to show people your security, to show people your freedom, Lord. We do not want to live for only ourselves, Lord. Forgive us when we look for access, security, or a gate anywhere else that's not you. And help us to live in freedom. In your precious and holy name, amen.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought